we're going to talk about none other than racist warmonger Hillary Clinton, who reappeared recently at a conference held by, I believe it was Israel Hayom, which is an Israeli right-wing pro-Netanyahu, like Likud newspaper that receives its funding from the Adelson family. That's of Sheldon and Miriam Adelson. And it was an interesting collection of all kinds of genocidal monsters, including Hillary Clinton herself. Let's just go ahead and play the first clip that went viral. Many of you may have already seen this clip. If you haven't, we're going to play it now.
That our students, smart, well-educated young people from our own country, from around the world, where were they getting their information? They were getting their information from social media, particularly TikTok. That is where they were learning about what happened on October 7th, what happened in the days, weeks, and months to follow. That's a serious problem. It's a serious problem for democracy, whether it's Israel or the United States, and it's a serious problem for our young people. And it was frankly shocking to me how little the students we were encountering, not only in this class we teach, which is a very large class, international relations about crisis decision-making, but students more generally. And that's why I mentioned the social media piece of it, because when you would try to talk to them to engage in some kind of reasonable discussion, it was very difficult because they did not know history, they had very little context, and what they were being told on social media was not just one-sided, it was pure propaganda. And so when you think about how to tell Israel's story, and it's important, it's not just looking internally, it's looking externally, and particularly looking at young people, because, it's not just the usual suspects, it is a lot of young Jewish Americans who don't know the history and don't understand. Eric, I was talking to Condi Rice.
Oh, God. I'm glad we cut it there.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear what you and Condi were talking about. This woman, I mean, look, I actually, when I saw this, the first thing I thought to myself is like, imagine being such a genocidal, racist monster that you can't comprehend why so many people, including the students in your international relations class, are horrified by a Holocaust. Because she thinks the Holocaust against Palestine is just. And you know what? She always has. I actually recalled, I covered Hillary Clinton a lot back during the 2016 election that she embarrassingly lost against Donald Trump. And I remember in the Democratic primary when she was running against Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders had really come out and started to defend Palestinians pretty strongly. At the time, it was considered fairly strongly. And she was so horrified. I actually pulled up this article I wrote back. I used to be at the Electronic Intifada back then, like a decade ago. And the article title is that I wrote on April 11th, 2016, Hillary Clinton attacks dead Palestinians in battle against Bernie Sanders. So she is consistent. I'll give her that, Eugene. And what she did back then, she was on stage. She basically was claiming that Bernie Sanders was wrong to condemn Israel's killing of Palestinian children in 2014 because they weren't actually children. In fact, Hillary Clinton claimed those were Hamas fighters who, after they were killed, other Hamas fighters came and replaced their clothing with civilian clothing. That's what she was saying about Palestinians in 2016. So this is a woman who has consistently, for her entire career, despised Palestinians and justified their murders, including of their children. So I'm not surprised she supports the genocide. I think what's shocking to me is that this woman gets to teach. She gets to teach young people who she condescendingly criticized in that little speech she gave on that panel for being outraged about genocide because they just don't get it. The problem isn't Israel's genocide. The problem is that Palestinians deserve to be genocided. Why can't people understand that? This is a woman who spread the rape hoax, the Jim Crow style rape hoax that was being perpetrated against Palestinians after October 7th, the rapes that never happened. There's no evidence they happened. And this is a woman that, despite over like 100,000 deaths at this point, according to a new study in Gaza, probably more. Officially, I think it's around, like, it stands at like 70,000. Despite all those deaths, and despite the majority being civilians and children, this is a woman who continues to support Israel's disgusting, horrific Holocaust against the people of Gaza. And let's not forget, it's a US-led Holocaust, and without people like her in both the Democratic and Republican Party, this Holocaust that continues over 2 years later would not be possible without the support of imperialist monsters like her. And Eugene, before I get your take on this, there's just two short clips I want to play just to remind people that Hillary Clinton's racism does not stop at Palestinians. I want to pull up the super predator quote because we can't ever forget what a consistently racist monster this woman is. Here she is back in the 90s talking about black youth when her husband was president and was embarking on the biggest mass incarceration scheme of young black people in history. Let's play that clip.
Not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel.
So there you have Hillary Clinton talking about young black people as super predators with no conscience, no morals. I mean, is she talking about herself? Is she maybe projecting on the black youth of America? And then let's not forget Hillary Clinton's response after U.S.-backed death squads lynched the former leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi. This was her response when she found out about it. Let's play her response.
So, I mean, that is the land of unconfirmed.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
Look at her. She's taking credit for a U.S.-backed death squad lynching of the leader of a country who was overthrown in a NATO regime change war. That is Hillary Clinton. And I'm not at all surprised that she said what she said. It's just crazy that despite a career, or maybe because of a career, of nonstop support for mass murder, as long as it benefits the ruling class of the country she lives in, she is still taken seriously and still paid a handsome amount of money to go spew her drivel, her genocidal drivel, wherever she goes.
No, I think it's well said. I mean, a couple points I'll make. I mean, first and foremost, I'm glad you pointed out the Adelsons being behind Israel Hayom, because that in and of itself, I mean, not only just into the supporting this genocidal politics, which is their number one issue, her late husband, Sheldon Adelson, it was his number one issue. But beyond that, the money is coming from gambling, which basically is ripping off working class Americans. You know what I mean? And in fact, she just bought a basketball team. And the whole point of that was to try to force the state of Texas to expand gambling. So it's just like such a malign agenda. I mean, it just feels like these are, you know, the ogres up on some hill in some castle in some medieval story about Dracula or whatever, but it's real life. And that's who they really are. And I mean, the other thing that's notable to me is that Hillary Clinton is so incredibly wrong on like the facts of this. I mean, when she says that you can't talk to them because they don't know history. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I don't know if it's the vast majority or whatever, but a very significant number of the most well-respected historians on the Holocaust that the Nazis committed against Jews and many other people during what we know as World War II in the 1930s have come out and said that this is a genocide. So in fact, in the actual field of Holocaust studies, the things that she's saying are so out there and so crazy and are just social media lies are now becoming coming significantly more accepted. And many of the top scholars are writing in many of the top publications in the English-speaking world saying that, yes, we believe that this is a genocide. So that's important. And the issue of knowing history, I mean, you yourself, Rania, have interviewed on your show, Rania Khalek Dispatches, a number of the top Israeli historians, well recognized around the world as top Israeli historians, who have also said this is a genocide and who have, of course, 100% co-signed everything we know about the over 100 years of occupation, ethnic cleansing, and genocide the Palestinian people have faced. And that's in addition to the fact that there are so many others that are out there. I mean, I don't even want to trash social media because they're not lies on social media, but it's just such a misorientation because you see so many of the young people who have been brought into something. Recently the People's Forum I'm not there today, but usually we're recording our show there from our studio there. Shout out to TPF. Recently had a course with Rashid Khalidi, the well-known historian, and it's like was packed out. You know, you've got hundreds of young people, thousands of people online, and now I was talking to someone who works in education there, and they said all day people are hearing is, when is he coming back? When is he coming back? I mean, yes, people were seeing terrible images on social media, but they weren't just like mindlessly consuming them. In fact, I think millions of people started to dig significantly deeper to the hundreds and hundreds of books and documentaries and other things that have been done over the past 30 or 40 years that are outlining so directly what is actually happening, what the background is, who the culprits are, and in fact have become significantly more well informed, which is why one of the most important facts I think about the encampments that took place all across this country is that almost all the encampments, or many of them, were accompanied by votes of students around divestment of their university from Israel. And what you could see is campus by campus by campus, 70%, 80%, 90%. It was not ignorance. It's actually because people were so moved by the horror they were seeing. Many more people became more engaged. And also, I would say the voices of Arab students, Palestinian students on campus finally were freed from the incredible straitjacket that they have been forced into for so many different years, that, you know, you couldn't speak up, or you were called a terrorist, or you couldn't speak up because you were worried about this or that. The huge amount of solidarity that was coming from other students and other young people what made it possible for young people who are from these countries, either as immigrants or descended from their parents or grandparents who are immigrants, who know this not just from the scholarship, but from their own lived experience, were able to finally have a platform and to speak up and to inform their fellow students about what was going on in a way that they, had tried to, but didn't have the same type of platform in the past to really speak to their peers in a way that was powerful and meaningful. So the whole idea of it's just like the algorithm is just so absurd, because I think it really just undermines the huge amount of education that people have engaged in to inform themselves about the horrors they saw on their screens, and then have taken informed action to try to change the policies that are being done in their name by people like Hillary Clinton. And I think it's a great moment for the world in some ways that millions of people are now saying, okay, we got to look into this because this is so bad. We can't just continue to look the other way. But that's what Hillary Clinton and Israel Hayom and all these other people are terrified about. That's why they're spending hundreds of millions and billions of dollars now. We had Craig Mokhiber on, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, but he used the phrase that there's $1 trillion curtain behind the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, and the occupation to hide it. And that now there are a lot of rips in that curtain. And now they are freaking out, and they're deploying whoever and however they can to try to, put that genie back in that bottle, because they understand that things have changed in a way that will never go back. And similar to many regimes in the past, including apartheid South Africa, there's a tipping point that has happened here. And, I think Hillary Clinton, sadly, or maybe not sadly, I don't really care about her, but, has just become this ghoulish vessel to do whatever is possible and use whatever social capital that she has gained over the years as a politician to now really be against, or really try to do everything she can to kneecap the growth of sentiment against genocide, against ethnic cleansing, against occupation, and in favor of Palestinian self-determination.
Yeah, and despite I don't know if I don't think we've sadly reached the tipping point quite yet. We've reached a tipping point in public opinion, but I guess in where it moves hasn't happened quite yet, because I think it is going to get worse. But all that's to say, you're right. They can't take back what people have seen, and actually that's despite their algorithm. That algorithm is literally constantly being manipulated to push CNN into your feeds and breakthrough news out of your feeds, especially when it comes to pro-Palestine content, whether we're talking about Meta or TikTok or here on YouTube. Look at our YouTube numbers for some evidence of that. But that's despite the way the algorithm is literally being built and adjusted to make sure that the pro-Israel narrative it has more reach than the pro-Palestine narrative. But it's despite that, in spite of that, people are still more concerned about the human toll that Israel's inflicting and learning about why than they are about buying bullshit propaganda. And to that effect, I just want to mention real quick, I know I mentioned this on our last show, the Israelis in the Middle East are becoming even more monstrous. with all of the U.S. backing that they're getting. Their genocide in Gaza is ongoing. There is no ceasefire in Gaza. They've violated the bullshit ceasefire over 500 times. They've killed over 320 people. That is not a ceasefire. There is no ceasefire in Gaza. There's an ongoing genocide under the cover of a peace plan that isn't a peace plan. And on top of that, they are ethnically cleansing and genociding people in the West Bank. They are escalating against Lebanon. And that's while the U.S. is pressuring the Lebanese government to essentially start a civil war with Hezbollah to disarm it so Israel doesn't have to. And they're escalating against Syria, despite the fact that Ahmed al-Sharaa, former al-Qaeda leader who's now president of Syria, is begging Israel to normalize with him. Just last week, the Israelis raided the countryside of Damascus, a town in the countryside of Damascus, and murdered 13 people and kidnapped several others, including they murdered children, in Syria. They're murdering left and right, and it's not going to stay in the Middle East. Like, this is your problem too. This is your problem if you're an American or live anywhere outside of the Middle East, actually. This is everyone's problem, not just from a moral perspective, because it should be your problem from a moral perspective, because none of us want to live in a world where Holocaust is okay and continues, but also from a material perspective, because the Israelis and their imperialist allies in the West, who they literally could not exist without, are bringing the war to us. They are bringing their surveillance tactics to us. They're kidnapping people off the streets and deporting them based on their pro-Palestine speech. And they're saying it out loud. I want to play one last clip from this Israel Hayom conference before we move on, Eugene. And that is a clip of this Israeli-American billionaire talking about just how much they've won over the last 2 years and how they plan to expand that war way outside of the Middle East against their enemies everywhere. Let's go ahead and play that clip.
If 2 years ago, I mean, just go back 2 years ago, Israel was on its knees and its existence was in doubt, and the threats it faced seemed insurmountable. If I had predicted to you then any one of the miraculous things that have happened in the last 2 years, any one of them, pick one: Lebanon, Syria, Hamas, the hostages, Iran, and the U.S. involvement, any one of those things, you would have said that the stress of the moment drove me to delusion. And they all happened in 2 years. And so we are living in a time of miracles and unprecedented opportunities. And the challenge for us here, and with this I'll end because this is key, the challenge for us here is to leverage Israel's successes into our successes and our victories here, because we are one people. Israel's weakness is ours and Israel's strength is ours. And now that Israel has turned the entire geopolitical situation on its head, our job in the diaspora is to leverage those wins and win here. Do to our enemies here what Israel did to its enemies there, and on that, the IAC is focused.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
So there you have it, Eugene. Any thoughts before we move on?
I'll just say, as Maya Angelou said, believe people when they tell you who they are the first time. Now we know exactly what their agenda is. Do to our enemies here as we did to their enemies there. No ambiguity whatsoever from the Zionist, propaganda machine here and there. So yeah, I think it's notable.